I witnessed a murder. I testified in court. The murderer gestured to me, "You're next." He was released from prison a week ago, and now I see someone lurking around my house. My name is Marcus Wright, and if you are reading this, then I am either dead or completely broken. Not that it makes any difference now. Jonathan Graves, the man I sent to prison 2 decades ago, is in my house. Not at the door, not outside the window. He is here, in the same room with me, and he has just placed a mechanical timer on the kitchen table, loudly clicking with every second. 24 hours, Marcus, he said in his lifeless voice. That's how long I'm giving you to say goodbye to your family. Then I will take everything from you. But first, you must understand the mistake you made by deciding to stand against me. It all started that evening when I, a 20-year-old student, was walking home from the library through the dank alley on Elm Street. I saw him, then just a stranger in a dark jacket, plunge a knife into another man's chest. The sound, not a scream, but something between a wheeze and a gurgle, haunts me to this day. I testified. In court, Jonathan Graves looked at me as if he were already devising his plan for revenge. His gaze was colder than the Chicago winter wind. 15 years in prison. It seemed that should have been the end. Mistake. He was released a week ago. At first, there were only hints. A shadow outside the window, an unknown number on my phone, silence on the line. Then the gifts started. The first was my cat, Old Ginger. I found him on the porch with his legs broken and... No, it's better not to describe the rest. The police reacted typically. No evidence, Mr. Wright. I begged them to check on Graves, but they just shrugged. He's complying with the terms of his parole. Tonight, when Sarah and Lisa had gone to her parents' place, I was alone. I checked all the locks, turned on the alarm, placed the shotgun by the bed. A storm raged outside, like a harbinger of the nightmare to come, and yet he got in. Not by breaking down the door, not by smashing a window, he just appeared in the living room, as if materializing from the darkness itself. In his hand, he held that very knife, the one from the alley. "Hello, Marcus," he said. "Long time no see." I tried to grab the shotgun, but he was faster. A blow to the stomach made me double over. While I was gasping for air, he methodically, without a single wasted movement, tied me up and sat me on a chair. "Did you think prison would break me?" he asked, bringing his face close to mine. "It made me stronger. I learned to wait, and now my time has come." He pulled a timer from his pocket, old-fashioned metal, with a loud mechanical click. Set it for 24 hours and placed it on the table. "These are your last 24 hours in the life you knew. Tomorrow, at this time, I will begin to destroy it. First your wife, then your daughter. You will watch." My breath caught. I tried to scream, but only managed hoarse sounds. "Why?" I whispered. "I just told the truth." He laughed shortly, emotionlessly. The truth? The truth means nothing, Marcus. Only power matters. And right now, I have it." He walked over to the wall where our family photograph hung and ran his finger over Sarah's face. Beautiful woman. A pity. Then he left, as quietly as he had appeared. He left me alone with the timer, its click echoing in my temples. I can't run anywhere. I can't call the police. He warned me that any attempt would lead to immediate consequences. I can't risk Sarah and Lisa. Click, click, click. Each sound brings me closer to the end, to the moment when Jonathan Graves returns and begins to put his plan into action. I am writing this to warn you. If you witness something that could destroy your life run, don't rely on the justice system. Don't believe that prison will reform men like him. They come back, and they do not forgive. The timer shows 23:59:03. I heard a floorboard creak in the kitchen. I think he's already here. The creak repeated. A clear, metallic sound, as if someone had stepped on a loose floorboard. I froze, peering into the semi-darkness of the hallway leading to the kitchen. Nothing. Only the slanted shadows from the streetlight falling through the blinds. Perhaps it's the old house making its usual nighttime noises. Perhaps. But I no longer believe in coincidences. My gaze stuck to the timer again. 23:57:42. Every second, marked by a loud click, was a drop wearing away the stone of my sanity. I can't just sit and wait. I have to do something. But what? Any action is a risk. Any movement is a potential signal for him, wherever he is now. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, I got up from the floor. My broken arm responded with a dull, throbbing pain, but adrenaline dulled it. I need a weapon. The shotgun was in the bedroom, but Graves, when he immobilized me, had kicked it into a corner. I crawled along the hallway, pressing myself against the wall. 23:56:01. Reaching the bedroom, I saw the shotgun. It was lying under the window. I grabbed it with my good hand. The weight of the cold metal gave me a phantom sense of control. I checked the action. A shell was in the chamber. Good. I turned, intending to return to the living room, and froze. On my pillow lay that very knife, the one with the wide blade. Next to it, a small, neatly folded note. I moved closer, not believing my eyes. I hadn't heard him come in here. How did he do it? With a trembling hand, I unfolded the note. There were only 3 words, printed in an old dot matrix font. I'm still here. A cold sweat broke out on my back. He didn't leave. He's still in the house. The game started sooner than I thought. The timer isn't a countdown to the beginning, but a countdown to the end. He is already here, and he is watching me right now. 23:54:50. I spun around sharply, pressing the shotgun stock to my shoulder, and swept the barrel across the dark corners of the bedroom. Nothing. Silence. Louder than ever. And through it, that damned clicking of the timer from the living room. I need to check the other rooms. I can't stay trapped. I moved towards the door, and at that moment, my phone on the nightstand vibrated. Once, a notification. My heart sank. I slowly reached out and picked it up. The screen was unlocked. The Notes app was open, and there was only one paragraph of text, typed in that now familiar font. You thought I would give you time to say goodbye? Sentimentality is a weakness. Your wife and daughter won't answer your calls anymore. The first lesson begins now. Find what I left in the microwave. Hurry. Time's up. Time's up? But the timer still showed. I rushed back to the living room. The timer showed Iropo, but it hadn't fallen silent. It kept clicking, counting into negative time. 17, 18. He tricked me. He gave me less time from the very beginning. I ran to the kitchen, my heart pounding, trying to burst out of my chest. The microwave. I yanked the door open. Inside, on the glass plate, was my old voice recorder, the one I used in university for lectures. I pressed play. First, there was the noise of a road, the hum of cars, then Jonathan's voice, calm and even. We're in Willow Creek, 214 Maple Street, the lovely apartment of your in-laws, Marcus. Look, Sarah is coming out for the mail. What a beautiful woman. And Lisa is with her. She's waving at the neighbor's cat. Then a sound that stopped my heart. The sound I heard 20 years ago in the alley. That same wet and wheezing sound. Only this time, it wasn't a stranger's cry. It was the stifled, horror-filled cry of my wife. It was short and cut off abruptly. Jonathan's voice came through the recorder again, closer now, as if he had leaned into the microphone. Lesson 1 complete. Don't rewind. What happened after doesn't matter anymore. Now it's your turn. The second lesson is acceptance. You couldn't have changed anything. You are just a witness. And witnesses have a tendency to disappear. The recorder switched off. I stood, unable to move, unable to breathe. The world narrowed to a ringing emptiness in my ears and a freezing cold inside. And then, from the hallway, came the calm, familiar voice. "Time's up, Marcus. Let's not drag this out. You don't want your daughter to wait too long, do you?" I turned slowly. Jonathan Graves stood in the kitchen doorway, frozen and silent, like the embodiment of death itself. In his right hand, hanging by his side, I recognized that very knife-its blade gleamed dully in the semi-darkness. But now my attention was drawn to his left hand. He was holding a smartphone, its screen turned towards me. A live stream was playing on it. The camera was pointed at a sleeping Lisa. My daughter was lying in her bed at her grandmother's house, hugging a plush unicorn, a gift from last Christmas. Her face was serene, her breathing even. She suspected nothing, and at the head of the bed, casting a long shadow on the pink wallpaper, stood another man, tall, stocky, wearing a black balaclava that hid his face. His gloved hand rested on the headboard, just inches from my child's head. "Meet my assistant," Graves's voice was almost gentle. "He's very diligent and patient for now." I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. My entire universe had shrunk to that image. The shotgun in my hand suddenly felt like a useless piece of metal. Whatever I did, that man by Lisa's bed would act faster. What do you want?" I breathed out, and my voice sounded alien, broken. "I already told you. Acceptance." Graves took a step forward. "You must accept the consequences of your choice. The choice you made 20 years ago, in that alley." He nodded towards the voice recorder in the microwave. "Sarah accepted. Now it's your turn." On the smartphone screen, the man by the bed slowly, almost tenderly, ran a gloved finger through Lisa's hair. She smiled in her sleep and whispered something. My legs gave way. "No," I groaned. "Please, kill me. Do whatever you want to me, but let her go. She didn't do anything." "That's precisely why it will be so effective," Graves replied. His eyes still showed nothing but cold conviction. "You took half my life from me, Marcus. I will take everything you ever loved from you, and I will make you watch. That is justice." He came even closer. The smell of rain, blood, and something metallic I couldn't identify hit my nostrils. "Here is your choice. You can try to shoot. You might even hit me. But my friend," he nodded at the screen, "will get the signal, and your daughter will die without ever waking up. Or," he held out the knife to me, "handle first. Or you admit your guilt, not to the court, to me." I looked from the knife to the screen, at the sleeping Lisa, at the man whose hand was now on her throat, not squeezing yet, but ready to do so at any moment. "Admit that your testimony was a lie," Graves continued in his measured, hypnotic voice. "That you were the one who stabbed that man in the alley, and I was a random witness you framed. Say it on camera. Then Lisa will wake up tomorrow morning. Maybe she'll even miss her daddy, but she will be alive. I knew it was a trap, that he wouldn't let her live, but what was left? To fight and guarantee her death? Or to accept his terms and pray for a ghost of a chance? Time. I looked at the timer, which was still showing negative values. "You don't have any." "Time is a relative concept," Graves parried. "For you, there is exactly as much left as you need to make a decision." I looked at the shotgun, then at the knife, and again at the screen, at my daughter's face, and I realized that I truly had no choice. I never had. My hand unclenched. The shotgun clattered loudly onto the tiled floor. Slowly, as if in a dream, I reached out and took the knife. The blade was cold as the emptiness filling me inside. Graves smiled. For the first time all evening, it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was the smile of a scientist whose experiment had been a complete success. "Begin," he said softly, aiming the smartphone at me. "Tell the world the truth and find peace." I looked into the lens, then at the sleeping Lisa on the screen. I opened my mouth to utter my surrender, to trade my honor, my truth, my soul for a phantom chance for her. And at that moment, the landline phone in the kitchen rang. A sharp, piercing ring cut through the tense silence. Graves glanced away for a moment, just for a fraction of a second, and that was enough. I didn't think. I acted. I didn't lunge at him. I didn't try to stab him. Instead, I did the only thing that could save Lisa. I turned and threw the knife with all my might at the kitchen window. The sound of shattering glass was like an explosion. The alarm went off. A siren wailed outside. The bright white light of the security floodlights flooded everything. On the smartphone screen, the man by Lisa's bed flinched and turned sharply, hearing the noise through the stream. His hand jerked. Graves hissed with rage, the first sign of real emotion all evening. He took a step towards me, but then stopped. Outside, in the distance, but already distinctly, came the sound of a police siren. The neighbors must have heard the alarm and the breaking glass. This changes nothing. His voice became icy again, but now there was steel in it. She will die, just now. He brought the smartphone to his mouth. Finish it. I screamed. I rushed at him, forgetting the pain, the fear, everything. We crashed to the floor with a loud thud. The smartphone flew out of his hand and slid across the tiles. I saw on the screen the man in the balaclava leaning over Lisa. His shadow engulfed her, and immediately, Lisa's room on the screen filled with people in dark uniforms, shouting, "Police! Hands up!" A gunshot. Another. The man by the bed collapsed, knocking over the nightstand. I was on top of Graves, trying to pin him down, but he was stronger. His fingers dug into my throat. Still, the end, he rasped, his eyes burning with pure hatred. The door to my house burst off its hinges with a crash. Voices, shouts, strong hands pulled me off Graves. Gasping for air, I crawled to the wall and, trembling, picked up the smartphone. On the screen, an officer was gently lifting Lisa. She was crying, frightened, but alive. Alive. Graves was being handcuffed nearby. He didn't resist. He was looking at me, and in his gaze I finally saw not emptiness, not cold, but defeat, bitter, absolute defeat. The police had stormed her parents' house after my silent call. The call I made by dialing her mother's number even before Graves entered the living room and leaving the line open. They had heard everything. Everything. I sat on the cold tiles, clutching the smartphone with the image of my crying but alive daughter to my chest, and understood that the nightmare was finally over. At the cost of an irreplaceable loss, at the cost of blood, but it was over. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I could breathe again. Story 2. My name is Ethan, and this is my brother Caleb. We own a small auto repair shop in Tucson that we inherited from our father, a man who dedicated his entire life to cars and taught us everything we know about engines, transmissions, and all those complex mechanisms that make cars move along the roads, transporting people from one point to another, from one life to another, from safety into the unknown, which they don't even suspect until it's too late to change anything, to turn back and choose a different path, a different fate, a different future that wouldn't lead them to old Highway 87 late at night when the moon is hidden behind clouds, and the only source of light is the headlights of your own pickup truck, illuminating the asphalt racing forward into the black, impenetrable void of the Arizona desert, where there is not a soul, no sign of civilization, only sand, cacti, and nocturnal animals hiding in the darkness, afraid to reveal their presence, unlike him, who stood there on the shoulder, covered in dirt, with wild eyes burning with some inhuman primal fire, and waved his bloodied hands as if signaling an invisible airplane that was supposed to land right on the road and take him away from this cursed place he had brought himself to through his own actions, his own crimes, his own cruelty that knew no bounds and recognized no pity for those who were weaker than him, who couldn't fight back, who became just another victim on the long list of those whose lives he had ended with his bloodied hands, which he was now waving in the light of our headlights, attracting our attention, forcing us to look at him, at this embodiment of evil that had come out for a night hunt. Caleb, who had been sitting in the passenger seat and almost dozing until that moment, suddenly jumped as if stung, his eyes wide with a horror he couldn't hide, a horror that pierced him through, from the top of his head to his heels, making the blood in his veins run cold and his heart beat rapidly, pounding out a rhythm of panic, fear, and a premonition of imminent disaster that was already on the threshold and preparing to enter our lives, to destroy them to the foundations, leaving not one stone upon another of what we once called our normal, mundane reality. "God, Ethan, step on the gas!" he shouted, and his voice held despair and plea, mixed with genuine terror at what might happen if we didn't drive past, if we stopped, if we made contact with him, a contact we so wanted to avoid, but which turned out to be as inevitable as sunrise after the darkest night that can happen in the life of a person standing on the edge of an abyss and not seeing the bottom where they are destined to fall. But I didn't make it in time. My foot, which should have slammed down on the gas pedal, making the car lurch forward away from this nightmare, hesitated for a moment, frozen in indecision caused by the shock of what I had seen, by the realization that what was in front of us wasn't just a drunk or a madman, but something much more terrifying, something that shouldn't have existed in our world, but did, and now we were face to face with it, with no way to turn away, to close our eyes and pretend nothing had happened. He threw himself right under the wheels. His movement was sharp, swift, devoid of all logic and self-preservation, as if he wasn't afraid of death, as if he was inviting it into his home, into his body, into his soul, which had perhaps left him long ago, leaving behind only an empty shell filled with hatred, cruelty, and a desire to inflict pain on everyone who crossed his path, even if that path meant death under the wheels of a car he himself had chosen as his instrument of self-destruction, or perhaps transformation into something even more horrible than he was before this moment, before this impact that should have been the end, but became only the beginning of our nightmare, our journey into hell, which we were carrying with us in the trunk, unaware that it would wake up and remind us of itself in the most creepy way imaginable. The impact was terrible. The sound of bones breaking under car wheels is impossible to forget. It penetrates deep inside, into the most hidden corners of your consciousness, and stays there forever, like a scar on your soul that never heals, that will bleed every time you remember what happened that night, on that road, in that emptiness that swallowed us and didn't want to let go, holding us in its cold embrace until we realized there was no salvation, that we were alone with our fear and with what we had done, with whom we had picked up and were driving with, thinking we were doing the right thing, that we were fulfilling our civic duty, that we were helping justice prevail, but in reality, we were simply becoming accomplices to his crimes, his madness, his game, which had no rules, only him and his victims, to whom we now also belonged, although we didn't understand it immediately, didn't realize the full depth of what we had gotten ourselves into, what horror we had brought into our lives simply by stopping and getting out of the car to see what we had done, whom we had killed, although in fact we hadn't killed anyone. We had only fallen into his trap, set for those who were foolish enough to believe in his death, in his helplessness, in his inability to cause harm when he lay motionless on the cold asphalt, bleeding and showing by his whole appearance that he was no longer dangerous, that he was just a body that needed to be removed from the road so it wouldn't block the traffic, which wasn't there anyway because we were alone, completely alone in this desert where there was no one who could help us, tell us what to do, where to go, what to do with what we had found, with what we saw when we got closer and pointed the flashlight beams at what was lying in the bushes, about 20 meters from where he had fallen, hit by us, but, as it turned out, far from dead, only pretending, only waiting for his hour to rise again, and continue what he had started, what he loved more than anything in the world, to inflict pain, to kill, to destroy everything. Living, that crossed his path, and now that living thing was us, Ethan and Caleb, two brothers from Tucson, who just wanted to make a living and return home safe and sound. But fate had decreed otherwise, and we found ourselves in the very epicenter of a nightmare that didn't end, but only gained momentum, becoming more terrifying and unbearable with every minute, with every kilometer we traveled, taking him with us, thinking we were in control of the situation, that we had him restrained, that he was our prisoner and not the other way around. We jumped out of the car. We were shaking from adrenaline, fear, and the realization of what we had just done, what we had done to this man. Even if he was a maniac, even if he deserved death, we had no right to administer justice with our own hands. We weren't judges or executioners. We were ordinary people who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now we were paying for it with our psyches, our peace of mind, our confidence in the future, which had vanished in an instant, leaving behind only emptiness and fear gnawing from within, like a worm that bores into an apple until nothing is left but the peel, unfit to eat, needed by no one, doomed to oblivion and decay somewhere in the dump of the history of our lives, which had split into before and after, into light and darkness, into normality, and the madness into which we were sinking deeper and deeper, unable to stop, unable to climb back out to what was before, to what we had lost forever that night. He lay motionless. His body was limp, lifeless, like a rag doll thrown on the roadside where no one would find it, pick it up, pity it, because it was needed by no one, because it was stained, spoiled, broken beyond repair, like him, like us, after everything that had happened, after everything we were yet to experience. Although we didn't yet know what awaited us, we still hoped that everything would be okay, that we would drive to the sheriff, hand over this bastard, and forget about him like a bad dream that wouldn't repeat, that would remain in the past. But the past has a way of returning, especially when you're carrying it with you in the trunk of your car, thinking it's dead, when it's only sleeping and waiting for its hour to wake up and remind you of itself, which it did when we had already started to believe that the worst was behind us, that we had coped, that we had emerged unscathed, although in reality we had only lured ourselves into a trap from which there was no way out except forward, into the darkness, towards the unknown that frightened us more than anything we had seen before, more than his bloodied hands, more than his wild eyes, more than that impact that still echoed in our ears, reminding us of what we had done, what we had committed, how we had changed our lives with one wrong move, one fatal mistake that cost us everything. A bloodied wrench lay nearby. It lay there on the asphalt, like a silent witness to what had happened before our arrival, before we appeared on this road and interfered with his plans, his rituals, his mad dance of death that he performed for himself, for his victims, for the whole world that didn't want to see him, didn't want to know about what was happening in its dark corners, where creatures like him could reign with impunity, administering their own justice, creating their own law based on pain, fear, and death, which were his faithful companions, his tools, his instruments of work, if you could call it that, because work implies creation, and he only destroyed, only annihilated, only took what didn't belong to him, what he couldn't return even if he wanted to, but he didn't want to. He enjoyed every moment, every second spent with his victims, each of whom was special to him, unique, irreplaceable, like a work of art he created with his own hands, with his wrench, his knife, or whatever he used to inflict pain, to take life, to feel like a God who decides who lives and who dies, and now he had decided that we would be next, that we would become part of his collection, his legacy, his dark legacy that he left behind. Although he wasn't dead yet, he was still with us, he was still breathing, he was still alive, and we were driving him with us, unaware that he would wake up, that he would come to, that he would knock on the trunk and remind us of his presence, of the fact that he was here, nearby, that he wouldn't leave until he finished what he had started, until he added our names to his list, his long, endless list of those he had met on his path and whom he had decided to destroy, to erase from the face of the earth as if we had never existed, as if we were just a dream he had that night when he stood on the shoulder and waved his bloodied hands, attracting our attention, luring us into his trap, into his world from which there was no return. And about 20 meters away in the bushes, we saw an old van. It was rusty, well-traveled, as if it had been abandoned here many years ago and forgotten, but we knew that wasn't the case. We knew it was here for a reason, that it was part of what had happened, part of what we saw when we got closer, when we pointed the flashlight beams at its open doors, from which someone's leg was hanging, pale, lifeless, belonging to someone who would never get up again, never walk, never run, never live, as they had lived before meeting him, with the one who was lying in front of us now, pretending to be dead, but in reality preparing for his return, for his rebirth, for his new act of violence that he was going to commit upon us, upon our souls, upon our lives, which would never be the same again, which had already changed forever. As soon as we saw that leg, that van, that crime scene we had stumbled upon by chance, but which became our destiny, our cross that we were to bear until the end, until the very bitter end that we couldn't foresee but felt with every fiber of our souls, with every cell of our bodies, which were screaming for help, for salvation, for this to end, for us to wake up and realize it was all just a dream, a terrible dream that would soon be over, and we would find ourselves in our beds, in our home, in our safe, familiar lives, where there was no place for such horrors, such nightmares, such encounters with the very embodiment of evil that had come out for a night hunt and chosen us as its new victims, its new toys, with which it could do anything it wanted until it got bored, until it grew tired, until it was time to move on to new victims, new horrors, new stories that would never be told because their storytellers would die without having time to share what had happened to them, what they had seen, what they had felt when they realized their lives had come to an end, that their time was up, that they had become just another chapter in his endless book of death, which he was writing with his hand, his inch, his gaze full of hatred for everything living that surrounded him, including us, including me and my brother, who were about to become part of his legacy, part of his madness, part of everything he represented in this world, chaos, pain, and endless night. We understood everything. In that moment when our eyes met what was in the van, with what lay there, motionless, lifeless, we understood that we were dealing not with an ordinary criminal, not with a common murderer, but with the one everyone feared, the one they spoke of in whispers, whose name had become a symbol of terror for the entire state, for everyone who had heard the stories of his atrocities, his cruelty, his madness that knew no bounds and recognized no rules except those he set for himself, for his victims, for his bloody carnival that he staged on the deserted roads of Arizona, where no one could stop him, where he was king, God, the master of life and death, deciding who would live and who would die. And now he had decided that we would die, that we would become his next victims, that we would join those who were already in the van, who had already become part of his collection, his legacy, his dark fame, which might never be revealed because we were alone here, and no one knew where we were. No one could help us. No one heard our screams, our prayers, our moans of despair that tore through the silence of the night, but didn't reach anyone except him, except the one who was now lying in the trunk and laughing at us, at our stupidity, at our naivety with which we had believed we could stop him, that we could deliver him to justice, as if justice existed for the likes of him, as if it could stop him, as if prison walls were capable of holding what couldn't be held by anything except his own will, his own desire to do evil, which was his essence, his nature, his only purpose in this life, which he lived as he wished, disregarding everyone and everything except his inner demons, which dictated to him what to do, whom to kill, how to torment those who fell into his hands. And now we were in his hands, although we didn't realize it ourselves. We thought we were in control of the situation, that we were taking him to the sheriff, that we were doing the right thing. But in reality, we were just following his plan, his script, his game, in which we were pawns, and he was the player deciding how this game would end, who would win and who would lose, and we were already losing, we were already doomed, we could already feel his breath on our necks, even though he was locked in the trunk, even though he couldn't touch us, but his presence, his laughter, his words, all of it put such pressure on us that we were ready to break at any moment, ready to lose our minds from fear, from horror, from the realization of what we had done, how we had erred by stopping here, by falling for his provocation, his game, in which there were no winners, only losers, and we were among them, perhaps the biggest losers, because we thought we were different, that we were stronger, that we were smarter. But it turned out we were the same as everyone else, the same victims, the same toys in his hands that he could break at any moment he pleased. We had stumbled upon the very maniac the whole state had been talking about for the past week, the Phoenix Butcher, who killed people on remote highways. His name was on everyone's lips. People feared him. They were looking for him, but no one could catch him because he was cunning, because he was smarter than those who tried to stop him, because he knew these roads better than anyone else, knew all their curves, all their turns, all the places to hide, all the places to wait for a victim, all the places to commit his black deed and disappear like a ghost, leaving behind only corpses and fear that spread through the state like a plague, infecting everyone who heard of him, who knew of his existence, who was afraid to drive on the highways at night, afraid to stop, afraid to help strangers, because one of those strangers could be him, the Phoenix Butcher, who killed indiscriminately, without pity, without remorse, like a machine programmed to destroy everything living that crossed its path. And now that path had intersected with ours, and we found ourselves face to face with the one all of Arizona feared, with the one no one wanted to meet, but someone was destined to, and that someone was us, Ethan and Caleb, two brothers who just wanted to go home, but we wouldn't be going home. We would never again be who we were before this night, before this meeting, before this impact that changed everything. Story 3. My name is Jake Morgan. I'm a simple auto mechanic from Brooklyn, and if you told me a month ago that I'd be sitting in a flying coffin at 10,000 meters with a gun to my head, I'd have laughed, but I'm not laughing now. Flight 307, New York to London. I was flying to my only sister's funeral. Liz. Cancer took her in 3 months. The irony is, it seems like she and I are going to meet up sooner than planned. It all started somewhere over the middle of the Atlantic. First, just a bit of turbulence, like usual. But then the plane seemed to drop into a hole. I was thrown up in my seat, the seatbelt cutting into my stomach. Carry-on luggage and bags tumbled from the overhead bins. I could hear screams, children crying. The flight attendants hurried to their seats, their faces tense. My old iPhone, the one I was using to look at our childhood photos with Liz, slipped from my weakened fingers and slid under the seats in front of me. Without thinking, I unbuckled and bent down to retrieve it. The air under the seats was stale, smelling of dust, ozone, and other people's feet. My phone was lying screen down, right under the feet of the man sitting in front of me. A guy in his mid-30s, unremarkable, a gray, sweaty hoodie, worn-out jeans. And in that moment, I saw it. He was sitting, slightly leaned over, and his hands were busy under the table. He was rolling up his pant leg. On his bare, hairy ankle was a homemade holster made of thick fabric and Velcro. With fingers trembling from tension or excitement, he unfastened it and pulled out a pistol compact, matte black, lethal. At that very moment, he lifted his head. Our eyes met in the semi-darkness under the seats. I froze in an absurd position, half crouched, arm outstretched. His eyes were empty, glassy, without a single spark of humanity. There was no fear, no panic in them, only a flat, heavy resolve. He didn't hide the weapon. Instead, he very slowly, almost theatrically, brought his index finger to his thin, chapped lips. Shh! And then, with the same finger, he pointed at me, as if placing an invisible, yet searing mark upon me. I jerked back, pressing myself into my seat. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it would jump out of my chest. The turbulence began to subside. The plane was leveling out, and before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, the man in the hoodie jumped to his feet. "Everyone stay in your seats. Nobody move." His voice, hoarse and strained, cut through the drone of the engines. The most terrifying thing? The synchronicity. This wasn't improvisation. This was a choreographed dance of death. Almost simultaneously, a second man rose from the middle of the cabin, skinny, lanky, with the pimply face of a teenager and the empty eyes of a psychopath. In his long fingers gleamed a blade, not a knife, but something between a cleaver and a machete. He stood with his back to the lavatories, blocking the aisle, and a third, a hulking brute with a bull neck and a short haircut, began moving slowly and confidently towards the cockpit. The cabin exploded into chaos. Someone shrieked. Someone wept. The elderly woman next to me began frantically reciting the Lord's Prayer, clutching a cross in her hands. The skinny one by the lavatories, without a word, yanked a flight attendant out of the first row. A young, fragile girl, Sarah. Her name was engraved on her badge. I can still see her wide eyes, full of horror. "Shut up!" I said. "Quiet!" he roared, pressing the crude blade to her slender neck. But the panic was unstoppable now. A man in a business suit sitting across the aisle instinctively stood up, probably trying to intervene. The skinny one's reaction was instant and merciless. He didn't threaten. He acted. With a sharp, practiced motion, he drew the blade across Sarah's throat. It didn't sound like it does in the movies. It was a wet, grating squelch, like butchering meat. I saw the flesh part. I saw the whiteness of something beneath, and then a fountain of scarlet blood. It gushed over the seats, over the passengers, onto the floor. Sarah didn't scream. She just made a short, gurgling sound and began to sag. Her eyes rolled back, and her fingers twitched spasmodically. She was gulping for air that could no longer reach her lungs. That rasping, death rattle sound hung in my ears for several seconds until she finally went still. At that moment, the guy in the hoodie, my guy, fired a shot into the ceiling. The roar in the confined space of the cabin was deafening. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the coppery smell of blood. A tomb-like oppressive silence fell over the cabin, broken only by sobs and the heavy breathing of the terrorists. "The next one to move gets a bullet in the head," the leader bellowed. There wasn't a hint of doubt in his voice. "We're going to the pilots. Sit still, breathe quietly, and you might just live." He started walking down the aisle. I sat, pressed into my seat, trying not to look at Sarah's horror-contorted face or the pool of blood slowly spreading down the aisle, but I could smell it. Pungent, metallic, nauseating. The terrorist passed me, his thigh just an inch from my shoulder, and he stopped. I felt his gaze on me, and slowly, against my will, looked up. "You," he hissed, so quietly that probably only I could hear. His breath smelled of cheap coffee and something sour. "You were snooping, curious." He shoved his hand into his hoodie pocket and pulled out my phone. The very one I'd gone after. "Looking for this, buddy?" He grinned, revealing uneven yellow teeth, and with all his might, slammed the phone against the floor. The casing cracked, the screen turned into a spiderweb of black glass, and showed no signs of life. The last thread connecting me to the outside world had snapped. Then, without the slightest warning, he reversed the pistol and slammed the grip into my temple with full force. An explosion of white pain, a ringing in my ears that drowned out all other sounds. I felt something warm and sticky start to trickle down my cheek. Blood. That was just a reminder. His voice came through the growing roar in my head. "Next time, between the eyes, keep your eyes on me. Understood?" He moved on, towards the cockpit, where the brute was already waiting. I saw them breaking something, hitting the lock, trying to break down the reinforced door. There were shouts from behind the door, another muffled shot, and then silence. The skinny one by the lavatories, covered in Sarah's dried and fresh blood, paced back and forth, waving the bloodied cleaver in front of the pale faces of the hostages. See that, you bitches?" he muttered, like a broken record. "That's what'll happen to everyone who looks at me wrong." 15 minutes passed. Hell on earth, but only in the air. I sat, pressing a bloodied handkerchief to the wound on my temple, which the elderly woman had silently handed me. Her fingers were trembling. I saw the brute up front finally break down the cockpit door. For a moment, the noise of the engines and voices spilled out, and then the door slammed shut again. A few minutes later, my guy in the hoodie came out of the cockpit. His face was a mask of calm. In his hand, he held the flight attendant's interphone. "Attention," his voice, cold and indifferent, sounded from all the speakers. "The aircraft is now under our control. We are changing course. Any disobedience will be punished by immediate death, an attempt to panic death. If anyone stands up, we will kill 2 random passengers. Is that clear?" He put the handset down. His gaze, scanning the cabin, found me again. He slowly walked down the blood-soaked aisle and stopped next to Sarah's body. He looked at me, then at the body, then back at me. Then, with a sickening crunch, he kicked the bloody corpse with his foot, so it rolled over onto its side in an awkward heap. "Get this trash out of here," he snapped at the skinny one. "It's in the way." With a dull, pleased smirk, the skinny one dragged Sarah's lifeless body towards the lavatories and shoved it inside like a sack of garbage. The door clicked shut, and my guy turned and sat down in the now empty seat in the row across from me, right next to the elderly woman. She squeezed her eyes shut and whispered her prayer even faster. He placed the pistol on his knee, barrel pointed in my direction, and stared at me, unblinking. Not looking away, he just sat and watched. He knew I'd seen everything from the start. I was a witness, and witnesses weren't needed. I was the weak link, and weak links get eliminated. I knew it as clearly as I knew the plane was flying. He didn't take his dead eyes off me. He had already killed me in his head, and now he was just waiting for the right moment to make it physical. Maybe when one of them got bored. Maybe just to break the tension. Maybe to demonstrate his power over all of us once again. We're flying somewhere over the endless, pitch-black Atlantic. The pilot is dead or captured. Ahead lies only darkness and the unknown. And across from me sits a man who has already sentenced me to death. And I feel my own blood slowly seeping from the wound on my temple, dripping onto my jeans, warm, sticky, drop by drop. It's counting down the last minutes of my life. And the worst part is, I've almost accepted it.